to welcome everybody to the XchangeCore in the Cloud discussion today, and begin by doing our welcome around the country on 9/11 of all dates to join together. So do want to take a moment to recognize not only that terrible event, but the call to preparedness that it evoked for first terrorism, but then after Hurricane Katrina, we again recognize the importance of all forms of natural, technological, and terrorism events. And since this is a group that is dedicated to that type of preparedness for all hazards, I want to just take this moment on 9/11 to thank all of you for dedicating a part of each day to making America more prepared, more responsive, and more resilient than ever before. It's a terrible event, but perhaps a wonderful legacy of 9/11, that we are, in fact, a more resilient country than we had been prior to that time. And that it's because of dedicated people like you that have moved us into an era of better preparedness. So with that said, let me offer anyone an opportunity around the country to comment on those thoughts or to introduce yourselves, since we are, in fact, the XchangeCore community. One of the things we do is give everybody a minute at the beginning of each of our calls to join in, introduce themselves, so that we can build that community. So the mic is open. Let's see, is anybody out west of the Rockies, who might want to say hello today?
Hi, Jim. Good morning, Jim. Jeff on Boyd Gaming.
Hi, Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, this is David Coggeshall with the Golden Gate Safety Network in San Francisco.
Hi, David. How you been?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Ann Rozinsky with the California Earthquake Clearinghouse.
Ann, welcome. And you have been a beneficiary of some of that preparedness just within the last couple of weeks. So
yes.
Maybe we can convince you to say a few words about XchangeCore and the Napa earthquake after a minute.
Yeah, I can prevent you a little bit. Sure.
Good. And anybody else out on the West Coast or west of the Rockies? How about west of the Mississippi? Okay, anybody anywhere who would like to introduce themselves, their mission, or their thoughts today on 9/11? All right. I always enjoy those who, sort of as Winston Churchill said, they also serve who stand and wait. In our case, they also serve who observe. So, today, our topics. First of all, why XchangeCore in the cloud? What makes it important? How we got there. The advantages of a cloud deployment. And we'll take a look at some of the cloud features that were enabled in XchangeCore 2.0. And then finally, highlight some of the cloud providers from the XchangeCore community who have stood up efforts to be able to support these tasks. So let's start out with why XchangeCore excels in the cloud. Well, from the very, very beginning, the architecture...
Excuse me, Jim?
Oh, Ann, that's right. Sorry, I got rolling there.
No, it's okay. And I ordinarily would wait until the end of your call, but I'm not sure I'll be able to stay for the whole thing. So
I understand. I did want to introduce you. Ann Rozinsky, California Earthquake Clearinghouse, who I just asked 30 seconds ago and forgot. So, Ann, thank you for sharing what you may about your experience in the Napa earthquake.
Well, I just a brief little summary. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a cooperative organization, and so we have no funding, and so everybody manages all of our partners are managing their own implementations at their own pace. So some are farther along than others. And the other thing is, unlike other disasters, earthquakes don't happen seasonally. They're not like fire. There's a fire or a flood season or, snow season. This is really a pop quiz. This is the first full-scale activation for the Clearinghouse in 25 years since Loma Prieta. So we had our hands full trying to make sure we hadn't forgotten everything in the intervening 25 years. We've done exercises, but this was, say, the real thing. So, as I said, some of our partners are farther along in their implementations than others, and the NASA JPL teams are definitely, the farthest along. And they have their XchangeCore, and then it's connected through our core is being hosted, our Clearinghouse core is being hosted by Cal OES. And the JPL teams provided some really important tools. The eDecider team provided some rapid damage and loss estimates within 24 hours, and they were shared out through XchangeCore to the Clearinghouse and Cal OES. And one of the products they provided was a strain magnitude map with critical infrastructure overlay, and that highlights areas with the greatest ground deformation that has occurred based on fault modeling. And then once GPS observations are available, the model can be refined and deformation is better constrained. And so the maps are used, to provide an early estimate of where deformation might have occurred and then, where the damage might be localized. And then the NASA JPL ARIA team provided a damage proxy map. That was a product that they have been providing for us through several of our exercises. And they also provided some INSAR data that were very helpful in identifying fault features, in particularly at the Napa County Airport. And what's interesting about that is that we had scientists and engineers doing overflights out of the Napa County Airport with CHP and didn't notice those features on the ground. They really didn't become visible until we had the INSAR data from the JPL team. So once we saw that, we were able to go out and look and make sure that none of the buildings and facilities at the airport were affected. And then, and also, as fate would have it, Jim Morentz was actually traveling in the region, so he actually stopped by the State Operations Center to help out. So that was welcome too. So, in conclusion, I'd say that what we had in place worked, but it just highlights that we still have a long way to go, and we just kind of focuses us on why we're doing this in the first place.
Well, thank you, Ann. Yes, indeed, it was very interesting being in the Cal OES headquarters, and wish I had been able to get down the road a little bit into the Clearinghouse to see that operation. But thanks very much. Anybody with any questions for Ann? No? All right. Well then, thank you very much for sharing that with us, Ann. Sort of live, on-scene reporting. Let's go back to our topics for today and begin by taking a look at why XchangeCore excels in the cloud. And the original architecture, it is a web service, IP-based architecture. As a result, the architecture, which was developed certainly not before the Internet, we're not that old, but was definitely developed before the popularization of the word cloud. And what the cloud really is the Internet with commercial and other hosted capabilities so that people are not having to do things on their local computer, store software on their local computer, but rather are able to connect using the Internet out to large banks of computers that allow us to be able to use the resources of those remote computers. That's the way XchangeCore was built. As we'll take a look at it a little bit, the ability to deploy multiple cores across geographic areas provides all the advantages, takes advantage of all the advantages of the Internet. The fact that XchangeCore creates and uses this dual exchange architectures that create what we call a decentralized semi-mesh network makes XchangeCore infinitely flexible and scalable. That is, you can take XchangeCores, configure them in just about any form. I have yet to come across a information management concept of operations that's being used by any organization out there that we could not map XchangeCore sharing capabilities to. There are two, because of the two architectures that we have. The first is a hub and spoke. that has applications connecting through a single XchangeCore, and the other one is peer-to-peer, which allows applications connecting to many XchangeCores, and the cores then talk to each other. And now what we're really doing in further enhancing and starting to commercially and privately deliver XchangeCore on the cloud is taking advantage of the XchangeCore 2.0 that we'll be learning about in a couple of weeks through intra-core exchange agreements, which really allows all the capabilities of peer-to-peer multi-core sharing to take place on a single core. And the result is that the architecture of XchangeCore helps to avoid the problem that I'm sure some of us have seen as we sat there at our computers and said, gee, why is this so slow? It avoids the problem of the centralized capability that can have degraded performance. It can be degraded from data overload. It can be degraded from processing requirements on that single central computer that's grinding away. And it can be degraded by simply the large number of users. The XchangeCore architecture allows us to spin up additional cores, additional capabilities, and now the cloud allows us to do that in ways that are very, very easy to accomplish. Taking a look at that two architectures, I want you to sort of fix this in your mind. The scalability and robustness and security, really, that these two architectures offer. And here is first our hub-and-spoke architecture. This is somebody has an XchangeCore, they connect applications to it, and applications are sharing that information. Add to that the peer-to-peer architecture in which that same model, hub-and-spoke, spins out into the cloud across different internet connections and allows the sharing of information within each one of those hub and spokes and between any single XchangeCore and another XchangeCore to accomplish the goal of that tremendous flexibility and security that we've talked about. So, why is this good? Well, a couple of use cases here. Because really the idea is to be able to grow the number of organizations that are sharing information, at the same time narrowing the type and quantity of information that's being shared among any of those organizations to exactly what somebody wants. Yes, we can gather lots of information, all throw it up into a list or onto a map, but that just provides information overload. Better through XchangeCore to manage that content so that I know that everybody is looking at exactly the same information, but only what it is that they need. So in the first case here, we've got an XchangeCore deployed across a single county or single organization. Applications might be connected from police and fire, public works, others. Or on the private sector side, it could be human resources in multiple manufacturing facilities in your supply chain. Single XchangeCore implementation does everything that anybody needs in that county or that corporation to be able to share the essential information that they need. One model. Second model is that you've got multiple cores, where I've got, as we know in South Carolina exists, 30-some counties have their own individual core. Each one of those connects into their own local web EOC, some into their own local dispatches, others connected into their sensors, moving that data around within the county, just like a hub and spoke. But then the sharing agreements among those counties, and they've set up sort of regional clusters of counties that have a first level of sharing, so the county on the coast is sharing to the next inland county because that's the logical way of information flow. So that multiple cores allows us to be able to move that information among those counties, and at the same time, each one of those counties has a sharing agreement with the state. So the state is able to observe what is happening in all the counties, screening the information only to obtain what they want. The example we often use is, I don't want to know every single traffic accident you have, but I want to know a traffic accident that's involving a hazardous materials carrying vehicle. That's the type of thing that you can do with the base level of exchange in XchangeCore. But number 3, again, highlights where we have gotten in this new round. With intra-core agreements, you can now create that use case number 2. Different organizations, different counties, different people who used to have to deploy a single core for themselves. That now can all be accomplished on a single physical core through the virtual creation of these intra-core agreements. So even further penetration into the capabilities that the cloud offers us is what this next version of XchangeCore provides. Well, why do I care? Some very good reasons. The first one, we've highlighted some of the flexibility in XchangeCore's architecture. Well, in the cloud, I can, in my cloud subscription, have a service that allows me to expand that computing capability to scale up when there's an emergency. So I can be operating literally at a few dollars a day under routine circumstances, and then push the capabilities up, really for only a few more dollars a day, to double or triple the capacity that's taking place. So that flexibility in the cloud, you can't get. Because, as the second bullet says, you don't have to buy anything. When you buy that computer put it on your local network and expose it out to the internet, you just dump the money into that computer. It will never get any bigger, and it will never get any smaller. So you've lost that flexibility to scale up and down. The cloud lets you do that. No capital expenditure. You're going to pay a subscription price for the base level, and if you wish, you can then scale that up during an emergency to gather more computing and more bandwidth that allow you to push more information through. And some of the commercial cloud offerings now do that automatically. One of them says, okay, this is how much you're going to pay, and if it's sitting there overnight and doesn't do anything at all, we're not even going to pay you a dime or charge you a dime for that, because we only want to pay or be paid for what you are using. And if you're not using our services, there's no reason at all to be charging you. So some very, very good commercial applications and business models being employed out there that are of tremendous benefit to the government communities. Disaster recovery, another one. Your network goes down, you got to have somebody fixing that network. Your computer breaks, you're going to drag somebody in or carry that hard disk off someplace. Completely transparent to you. You don't even know in the cloud which computer your program is operating on, because it will shift around as computers are maintained. You've got banks of computers, disaster recovery, because the data facilities are spread around the world in many cases, certainly not in the same place where your disasters are occurring. Disaster recovery, a tremendous advantage of the cloud. Similarly, you're going to improve your security posture and do it without having to have more security personnel in your IT department. Security is going to be taken care of. When that heartbeat bug came out a little while ago and everybody was concerned about it, it took a matter of hours for all of the cloud providers to have gone in, dealt with their OpenSSL tools, and resolve those problems very, very quickly. Not something that somebody had to do locally in a cloud implementation. Low maintenance, another one. Everything with XchangeCore, when it is time for an upgrade, happens. You don't even know about it, think about it. It's not something that you ever worry about. Plus, that Java update that keeps popping up on your computer saying, would you like to install Java? You don't have to think about that at the server level. Better collaboration through extensive and interactive platforms. You bring those tools together and the XchangeCore capabilities that you saw in multiple instances out there all become more wedded to the cloud and more capable of improving your ability to push information around. Now, pushing the information around, distributing that content out there through XchangeCore, is just enhanced by the cloud because you can very quickly create new agreements, and as we look a little bit, you'll be able to create agreements on these single hardware instances as well. Final thing is, hey, you're always looking at new software, you're always having to buy new hardware, you're always testing and deploying. Huge burden taken off of your IT department by employing cloud solutions. So, XchangeCore, available in the cloud because of its native architecture and because of the advantages that exist in the cloud. Well, let's take a look at some of the new features that add on to that original architecture of XchangeCore, because October 9th, I think, is the formal session that we're having here, introducing XchangeCore 2.0. And there are three major features of it. One of them is Microsoft SQL Server, second is Linux, and the third one is the extended intra-core service agreements. So let me touch on each one of those. The first one, SQL Server, that's one of the new features, as I mentioned. And Microsoft SQL Server is replacing the exist database in a standard XchangeCore installation. Previously, under the program that we had with DHS, there was a requirement that everything in XchangeCore be open source, so that there would never be any licensing requirements of it. Microsoft SQL Server Express is not open source, but it is free. So now that we have that XchangeCore is being run by the XchangeCore community, we still have the goal of not making anybody pay anything, but we're able to use some of the capabilities in Microsoft SQL Server Express. That is the standard automatic download and installation when you run the install kit for XchangeCore. So boom, shows up, there's Microsoft SQL Server Express. Still committed to a no-cost deployment, but with something that we think you'll find a good replacement for the exist database. If you're operating in an enterprise that already has Microsoft SQL Server Enterprise already deployed, you can make that change, say, hey, I want an enterprise, instead I want to have the SQL Server Express, and that gives you an even more capable, large-scale database that will sit behind your XchangeCore. And what that database does, it stores everything related to the infrastructure services and the domain services. So all your agreements in the infrastructure services and resource instances, profiles and notification, all the rest of that, now switch out to use SQL Server, as well as all the work products for incidents and sensors and all the other things that you're familiar with. So for a Windows implementation on the cloud, this has made XchangeCore far more capable and readily deployed in a Windows implementation. Linux is the second of the capabilities in 2.0, and Linux is a key operating system across the Internet. Everybody debates operating systems. Linux is a major factor in the Internet. Because, as we saw earlier, XchangeCore's native web service capabilities, we've been operating on Linux for a while. As early as the 2011 national level exercise, we implemented Linux on there. There are current deployments of version 1.3.3 that are serving multiple end users out there that are operating in the Linux environment. So this is a proven, tested, well-established. I want to remind you that Linux installation guide was a result of the XchangeCore community working. They pulled together the guide, spot-on response to the first round, and produced a guide. Indiana University then added some supplements to do that, to be able to do a non-root installation of the XchangeCore on Linux. So this has been a great example of the community itself coming together and taking the capable tool in XchangeCore, but under the DHS contract, Windows was the operating system, so there was never a task to go out and do anything on Linux. The community picked it up and said, hey, we can make this work, and successfully has done that, and we've got lots of great examples out there right now. But there's a further XchangeCore community contribution that's needed, because we have the opportunity now to revise the guide and test XchangeCore 2.0 and get a couple of Linux SQL databases operating with it. MySQL or PostgreSQL, the two of the more popular ones, although there are other ones out there. So throwing this out as a challenge, let's say, to the XchangeCore community, let's get involved. Go up there, register to be part of the program back on the Join Now page in the XchangeCore.org website. Let me know that you'd like to participate in this. We have a Linux user group that has probably pushing 24 people on it now, and I'll be tossing this challenge out to all of them, because when 2.0 comes out, I think that it should be very quickly thereafter we'll be able to see the implementation on one of the Linux SQL databases. So now let's get to the real heart of what we have added in 2.0, and that is the intra-core agreements. This is an extended agreement service, and I want to give credit here. This is a result of this broader XchangeCore community. This is a result of the Department of Defense Northern Command project that has been operating for the last year and a half or so, maybe a little bit longer than that, to implement some specific capabilities for the .mil environment. And all those are now getting folded back into the next version, which is 2.0, of XchangeCore. So great example of community development. And this built around the concept of a regional or multi-jurisdictional core. And it's what the military's concept of operations called for. And XchangeCore did it. But we said put a XchangeCore in base 1 and base 2 and base 3 and base 4 and base 5. DoD came in and said, let's see whether we can work that better, because we have lots of cloud computing-like resources on our .mil network. Couldn't we provide more computing resources at a single location and then allow the same type of agreement exchange take place among those bases, but using a single physical set of hardware and network? That's what we did through ARDEC, the Armament Research Development Engineering Center, and work with Leidos over the last year and a half, has turned this concept of a regional core into reality. And what it does is allow information exchange based on agreements within a core. And the principles of that are that there's a local core that's going to send the information, the from core, and then a remote core that's a to core. Always had that, but now they're all in the same machine. They're in the same set of XchangeCore web services. We're now carving out agreements virtually, let's call it. Those agreements have 4 different components. First one is anything that's connected to a core share among those things. Then we've created a set of specific IDs, which always resided on different cores in the previous version. Now they can reside on a single core to connect individual applications. Then there's a concept of groups that's going to affect both the users and the applications. And then finally, there's the combination of IDs and groups to really create the type of granularity of sharing that was required in military and military civilian exchanges. So you just saw this a little bit earlier, but this is the before. This is XchangeCore version 1.3.3 that you can get right now today. And it's the single core all the agreements connected to it. Version 2.0 with the enhancement establishes this concept of groups and applications, groups and individual IDs. So the folks in the triangles, folks outside of the triangles, everybody's related to the core, but you've got two separate groups that are now set up there that have special capabilities for sharing. Now let's take a look at what some of those special capabilities are. First of all, in rule type 1, anyone in the core can share. So that red circle, dotted lines around there says, hey, we're going to move data among any of us based on this first set of rules. The second rule type says, all right, we have individual applications that you see there being grouped together, exchanging information in those sets of dotted lines. That information, while all these other things, all those other blue lines are operating and moving and doing all sorts of information exchange on a one-to-one basis or on a entire core-wide basis. The ones that are circled with the red dotted lines have a separate conversation going on. When they say something, it's interpreted, and the only other people who are going to see that special stuff are going to be the ones who are inside of those circles. So that's the application level exchange. So let's say you've got a WebEOC in one place, you've got a dispatch system in another place, and you've got a model, a computer model that's going to come out about a chemical plume, let's say. Well, the dispatch and the WebEOC could be sitting out there and never know that each other is there. The plume model could be sending to the WebEOC and sending to the dispatch system so that information is being shared, but what's happening on dispatch and happening on WebEOC is not being shared back and forth. So you can develop that type of granularity associated with this applications level exchange. The third rule is exchange within groups. So this one says, all right, I can go in there and say, I've got this group, I'm going to have these several applications that are associated with that group, we're always going to share this information. Now, I can also have the ability to move that information around among the groups, and obviously, there's going to be other information that's not related to those groups. The plain blue lines there, that first circle that we had, that can be overlaid with that. So I can be talking to people outside, but can't be sharing the information that is detailed and designed for only inside of that group. Now the last rule type says, let's bring it all together. Here I can have sharing among anybody for certain types of information. I can have sharing among groups for only group-limited information. I can have sharing across applications that have designated only that type of information to be shared. And I can have those applications, and the one up on the upper right-hand side, have those applications that are, in fact, going to be within a group, be sharing out with somebody else in an application to application, but I know full well that if I've limited the information to what's being shared within the group, it's not going to get shared out to this other on an application to application sharing. So wonderful, wonderful new ability within a single core to define how you want to share information. And this is going to be very, very useful. I think our first big implementation of this is going to be in the SABRE program. You've seen these calls on SABRE in the past where we share commercial opening and closing information from corporations that expose that out to different organizations out into the government. But there are companies, communications industries, utility industries, and others that say, I'm not quite as free with my information as a Walgreens is or a Walmart is I'm happy to give that to the government, but I only want to give it to the government and not know that it goes to places I don't know. Well, with this set of agreements, we can have information coming in from a group, and you've seen them on these calls, like Walgreens, that says, Open closed stores. I'm happy to tell people that. So that information would be the blue lines, and it could go to anybody who's connected into that. Other ones, like a utility that says, hey, I want only a government agency, and I want only the government agency I know to be part of the group that gets that information. I want to get the Walgreens information because that will be very helpful to me, but I don't want to give out to Walgreens the fact that this utility outage exists or water supply has been, contaminated. So that's a little case study of how I see this unfolding in some of these groups, rules being able to be employed in some of the real-world applications that you've seen recently. So let me stop at this point, see whether anybody has any questions about the different types of new sharing that are taking place, any use cases that you want to throw out that I could see whether we could quickly apply to that. All right. That was looking at a single core. Well, that alters the way we deploy as well. Version 1.3.3, the before case, this is the deployment. You saw this earlier. A hub and spoke deployment, the big enlarged there, and then out in the cloud, a bunch of hub and spokes, each one of which is going to be connected in a group sharing. What we do in enhancing this is take those hub and spokes that have a single core deployment back and forth, like we've seen in many cases, and we add to that single physical core with that regional intra-core agreement deployment that we just talked about. The individual groups, the sharing of those applications inside of the triangles among those different bases, again, borrowing our military analogy since that's where it came from. So in this case, in version 2.0, the agreement service rules govern not just the core-to-core sharing, but the core-to-client, core-to-application sharing. Extremely important, and then really want to highlight here, in a complex environment, reducing the operations and maintenance costs by deploying these regional cores. That's something we're going to see unfold in some of our larger implementations where there are multiple cores. I'll be very interested in seeing, I think within a year we'll have some very good documentation on ones that are able to look at the frequency of use and say, you know what, we've got 4 counties up here that are not on the coast, they're inland, so I have less of a problem to worry about hurricanes or oil spills or anything. I can now reduce my operations and maintenance costs by moving them into a single regional core rather than having them each maintain their own individual core. So that gives this increased deployment flexibility that looks like this when we finally get to the type of large-scale deployments, where I can have individual cores. They still talk off there to that regional core that you see in the large drawing there, but then you can have lots of other regional cores out there with their own same sharing agreements, those sharing agreements extending out to each one of the individual peer-to-peer cores, creating, again, this wonderful degree of flexibility that is pretty straightforward. And those of you who have built agreements in the past, you're going to love the new tools that we have for building agreements. But we'll talk about those in a minute. So, some of the functionality here in this new agreement service. Basically, those 4 levels that we talked about, core, an organization, an application, and a user. Those form a matrix here to be able to see how each of those take place, and you see the green X in that core-to-core? That's what we had in XchangeCore 1.3. Every one of those additional cell exchanges has been a result of our DoD project and become part of the XchangeCore 2.0. And that list down there, I won't go over them again because we talked about them, but cores, organizations, having those groupings together, doing application to application and core individual cores and individual organizations, wonderful ability to create that that type of very discrete exchange. And that last point is an important one because it governs the ability to do everything. Notify, exchange all of those individual work products, the feeds that come out of there. So my KML feed, if I'm only authorized to be a certain group, I'm only going to get that portion of my KML or GORSS feed. The engineering team did a spectacular job in putting this together. Dives down a little bit deeper, but those of you, I won't even talk about this too much because it does the same thing. It's the core. If I want to write an agreement for the core, I am going to have my core user at the host, which looks like usage@mydomain.com or XchangeCore there. And then if I move up to the user ID level, then I'm going to have that same string, but I'm going to have IDs and say I want to have ID 1 and talk to ID 2 and have talk to ID 3. Or I can move it up a different level and say, all right, let's cluster all those IDs into groups, and I'm going to share here between A and B, but C isn't going to see anything, or A, B, and C all see it. And then I can combine those IDs in groups. Say this ID out of that group, this group, everybody in there gets it. So very nice flexibility. All of which looks really confusing, which is why I added that last point there. Join us on October 9th, because the new Agreements console makes this really easy to do. It's far easier to do this intercore, complex, four-level agreement sharing than it ever was to build one single core-to-core agreement in the past because of the tools that have been put together, again, by our great engineering team. So, basic principle, 4 different levels, and you're able to use that physical core to drive a whole range of different exchange agreements. All right, next to last component here, cloud deployment. It exists today. 3 organizations that are part of the XchangeCore community have stood up and said, yes, I'm game. And Spot On Response, doing commercial cloud hosting, offering solutions on both the Amazon and the Google Cloud, has current clients out there that are subscribing to Spot On Response hosting of XchangeCore. That's an organization that the XchangeCore community is recognized as being a good partner, good player with XchangeCore. Second one, Leidos, the original developer of First Usage, and then the .mil version, and now Keystone. What they offer is custom private cloud hosting. Leidos can use either a organization's individual data center and implement XchangeCore there, or Leidos maintains its own data centers, all secure, many of them certified for high-level security operations. So you can have your XchangeCore managed by Leidos, providing a set of managed services to keep XchangeCore operating. And then Ardec, the group that has, for Northern Command, has done all the .mil creation of their components into XchangeCore. They stood up and said, hey, we can do .mil work. We don't really call it cloud deployment, but it really is inside of the GuardNet and the other implementations inside the .mil network. But that's a third of the groups that has stood up and identified themselves as offering services out on a commercial basis for you to be able to offload XchangeCore from your IT requirements and provide it out in a cloud environment with all those advantages that we discussed earlier. If you take a look and want to learn more on that XchangeCore website, there's now a brand new page that went up describing cloud and highlighting and giving you some contact information for each of these 3 organizations should you want to pursue their delivery of the cloud information, XchangeCore on the cloud for you. Okay, there's still more to learn about XchangeCore. The next 2 sessions, we will be introducing the XchangeCore community. You've heard it mentioned many, many times. This is going to give you an opportunity to see how you can participate more. The new information sharing resources that are for the XchangeCore community, and how you can list your organizations as the three that you just saw as participating in the community and on the specific kinds of services that you offer for the community itself. That takes place on September 25th, October 8th, although I think that might be the 9th. It is the 9th. October 9th, I can do that in real time. October 9th is when we'll be introducing XchangeCore 2.0. At that point, the executable version will be available for those who qualify under the DHS program. It is principally responder agencies, and you can certify yourself as a responder agency on the XchangeCore website, as well as available up on GitHub for the open source version of it that will allow everybody to begin adding your own innovations to XchangeCore. That will also give an opportunity for those members of the Linux XchangeCore community to begin working on adapting the user guide and the implementation of that to the Linux SQL databases as well, which is a program that we're going to be pushing folks for. So, a couple more learning sessions, and then we begin to switch back to some of the more end-user-oriented descriptions. Normally, we would have prevailed upon Ann Rozinsky and her team to do this session, as we have done after some of the other earthquake exercises that have taken place, but wanted to keep this part flowing with the instructional portions about the new rollout of XchangeCore. So with that, looking forward to seeing you over the next couple of weeks. Let me say the microphone is open. Questions, comments? The floor is yours.
Jim, this is Jeff.
Yes, Jeff. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I missed an opportunity at the beginning, but you thanked all of us, and on behalf of all of us, we'd like to thank you. Your dedication, your commitment to this project, keeping the faith that we're all coming along just fine, and that we're all going to join this party and we're going to turn it into what it needs to be. We just really appreciate that, and your commitment is just phenomenal. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you. Always helpful to keep up the spirit of everybody on the team. So thanks. Other thoughts, comments?
Jim, can you hear me?
Yes, how are you today?
Hi, Jim. It's William Miller. Hey, I sent you a little note about that we're starting a new challenge for the NIST called the Global Cities Team Challenge. And I guess I'd like to see if we can work with XchangeCore to participate in that activity. I wonder if you'd like to think about that.
Oh, absolutely. We'd be happy to play along in all those NIST things. So, yep, give me some more information about it, and let's see whether there's a plan that fits into ours.
But it is a nationwide activity, so anybody in the country or even outside the country can participate.
Excellent. We'll promote that in the next newsletter or two. Anybody else with parting comments?
Hey, Jim, one other thing. I do have some information on putting SQL on Linux, and try and remind me, and I'll see if I can do something for you on that.
Happy to share that. I'd appreciate it. All right, well, let me wish everybody an excellent couple of weeks, and we will reconvene on the 25th. If you need anything in the meantime, don't hesitate to give us a call. Bye, everybody.